Hello everyone, my name is Miranda and today I am going to be discussing again the environmental crisis and why I believe that it is not real. So every day there is a new story on the news regarding the environment and the crisis that it is in. However, just because the climate is changing does not mean that it is dying. Change can be good sometimes. So today I'm going to talk about why I believe that the environmental crisis is not in fact a crisis and is not in fact real. And before I give my reasons as to why I believe that, there's just something I have to say real quick. So I do believe that there is no denying that the climate is changing, but that does not mean that the environment is in a crisis. People have been saying for decades that we are running out of time to address the climate change. We're all gonna die because it's not gonna be able to be reversed and all of this stuff. And the only difference between the climate change that is happening now and the ones that early humans went through is that now we have the technologies to assist us through any crisis. So now that I stated that, let me give my reasons as to why I believe the environmental crisis is not in fact real. So my first reason is that this has happened before in Earth's history and it's natural for the climate to change. The climate is actually constantly changing naturally. We all know about the event of the mass extinction of dinosaurs and the Ice Age. We all heard the stories in school that early humans had to trudge across practically the Earth and relocate due to rapidly changing climates. And this is not the first time that this happened. It's probably not the last time that this has happened. So an example of this is in the year 539 AD, the Ilopango volcano in El Salvador exploded so violently that its eruption plume reached high into the stratosphere. Cold summers, drought, famine, and plague devastated societies across the world. Eruptions like Ilopango inject the stratosphere with reflective droplets of sulfuric acid that screens sunlight, and this cools the entire climate. Sea ice can increase as a result, reflecting more sunlight back into space and thereby amplifying and prolonging the global cooling. So Ilopango triggered a roughly 2 degrees Celsius drop that lasted for 20 years. More recently, the eruption of Pinatubo in the Philippines, and my bad if I pronounced that wrong, in 1991 cooled the global climate by 0.6 degrees Celsius for 15 months. So while that's not as extreme as the Ilopango volcano, this just shows that this was happening all the way back in 539 AD, and it's happening back in the 90s. So things like this just naturally happen, and human beings survived it then and will survive it again. So my second reason as to why I believe that the global environmental crisis is not real is that new technologies exist that can help agriculture as the climate changes. Unlike in the past, we have reached a point in human history where we have developed technology to help us through any sort of crisis that we go through. And there are a bunch of different and new technologies being developed that will assist farmers who are struggling. So according to worldbank.org, in China, a suite of projects representing 755 million US dollars of World Bank investments supports resilient and lower emissions agriculture practices and institutions. One project has helped expand climate-smart agriculture through better water use efficiency on 44,000 hectares of farmland and new technologies that have improved soil conditions and boosted production of rice by 12% and maize by 9%. More than 29,000 farmers' cooperatives have reported higher incomes and increased climate resilience through this project. Another recently completed project has reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 23,732 tons of CO2 equivalent and increased the soil carbon sink by 71,683 tons CO2. So this is just proof that we have technologies already that have helped farmers be more sustainable and decrease the chances of an environmental crisis happening, and we will continue to develop more and more technologies. And it's not just happening in China either. It's happening in plenty of different countries. I just use China as an example because it's big and responsible for a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So my third and my final argument as to why I believe that the climate change is not real and the environmental crisis is not real is that we have been able to save many animals that were on the brink of extinction. One main argument for the environmental crisis is that plants and animals will be the first to die off, and we have already been able to intervene and stop a lot of endangered species from becoming extinct, and we've also prevented a lot of species from even becoming endangered. So according to The Guardian, using information on population size, trends, threats, and conservation efforts from 137 global experts, researchers filtered a long list of about 17,000 bird and mammal species to identify. So there was a short list of 81 that were listed as threatened by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So these details were then used to calculate the likelihood that each of those species would have become extinct without conservation measures. And then researchers found between 21 and 32 bird extinctions had been prevented, and that between 7 and 16 mammals had been saved. So birds analyzed in the study benefited from things like invasive species control, zoo conservation, and habitat protection, and some mammals in the study were helped by legislation, introduction schemes, and zoo collections. So human beings have already been able to intervene and save animals, and if the climate changing does impact plants and animals, then we will continue to be able to use conservation measures to help those animals. So those are my 3 reasons as to why I believe that the environmental crisis is not real. And listen, I get it. Saying that there is an environmental crisis causes panic, and panic causes action, but there's just no need for it. Human beings have survived worse, and we will survive this. With the help of technology and conservation measures and science continuing to advance, we've already prevented things from happening, and we can prevent this too. So stop panicking over these news stories that discuss climate change. Change does not mean bad all of the time, and we don't need to assume the worst. Our planet has been around long before humans, and it will be around long after us. Thank you, and have a good night.